Where's the cameras?
There we go. Hello and welcome. And you'll be able to see some of the people here, although there's more than half the people are off camera. So we've got a good group here, but thank you for coming. Thank you for attending online and in person. And I want to tell you that this is the East Point Movie Critic Discussion Group, and we are discussing the Oscar-winning film, Drive My Car. And mark your calendars, next time is going to be May 26th, and there will not be a June meeting, because I'll be away. But May 26th will be next time. The film will be announced. I'll send an email because I think everybody here's emails. If I don't, let me know and after the meeting, and I'll add you to the list. Okay. So Elizabeth will flag anyone who, if you want, raise your hand if you have something to say, and here too if I miss you. So let's see. Okay, let's start the usual way. Show of hands. Who liked the movie?
Wow, Lord, can we do it?
All right. So about
Up or down?
so yeah, for liking the movie, start with liking the movie. Okay, and then so-so, who was so-so? Ah, okay. All right. And then did not like the movie. Okay. Okay. All right. Everyone really did not like it. Okay. Two.
Cindy.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
I was handsome.
All right. Okay, Kathy, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. You could just say what you didn't like about the movie,
All right.
but speak loudly so they could hear you too.
Well, I mean, it was really long.
Fair point.
So we divided it in half, but I didn't get it. I really just didn't understand it. And so I'm looking forward to hearing, helping
Sure, sure.
me understand it.
Okay.
That's why.
All
Is
right.
the fact that she fell asleep during?
Yeah,
I admit, I started to doze off and had to go back. I had a couple of moments of that. Okay. Did anyone else feel it moved too slowly?
Oh, my God.
Most of the hands are up. Okay. I'll raise mine too on that, by the way. Okay.
But Ed, not just that it would move slowly, it was unnecessarily slow.
Right, it was way too long.
Okay, so that's the point of discussion,
Yes.
because some of the critics have praised the pace of the film, and others have said what you said,
No,
that
no,
it could have been cut.
pace is different than extraneous crap.
Well, the
Sorry.
shots that they lingered, to put it mildly,
Yeah.
where I'm like thinking, he can cut here,
Yeah.
he can cut here, he really can cut here, and he's not doing it, but, okay. Okay. All right, and then for those of you who liked it a lot, what made you like it a lot? Anyone want to share? I'm gonna call on Fred though first. So,
Well,
but speak up.
we all know people who are miserable. And this is about Uncle Vanya, and this is a parallel with the movie. And you had two people who were sad, and I think that's one reason it was so slow. It wanted to
Fred,
make
which two? Because I thought everyone was.
Cindy thought everybody was
protagonists
sad.
were their glass was half empty, and same thing in Uncle Vanya, most of the characters, and it came to some resolution at the end. In contrast, there was this Korean couple with a lady who was with sign language and deaf, and she was, every time you saw her, she was smiling and bubbly, and they were making the best of the life. So their glass was half filled, and these.
And her husband too. He
Yeah,
was
they
like
were
the
so
happiest
bubbly.
person in the movie,
It was
right?
Such a contrast. His characters were such a contrast to everyone else. So I thought that was what impressed me about the film. And I really went back, because we all know people like that.
Okay, yeah, Elizabeth?
I think it was a very touching, moving movie. It was grief, life with grief, how you feel about grief, and how you eventually can come to freeing yourself and freedom from the grief. And for all the things that you did not do. It's very, it happens a lot. Somebody dies and you think of all the things you should have said or done. And eventually, sometimes you do come to freedom. So it's a very universal theme.
I would agree to a great extent with what Elizabeth said. I thought the film was about how you deal with loss, even if it takes longer than what might be considered a typical grieving period.
Like the
Because
time of the movie, the length of the movie.
But
like
there were two losses for him. He lost a daughter
right,
and a wife.
Right.
That takes much longer to get through. So they were already having a problem with the first loss, the couple.
right.
And
Yes,
I was gonna say, and I was thinking, not saying what needed to be said at the time it needed to be said.
good point. Not saying what needed to be
Not
said
saying- and not
when at the time it
communicating.
probably should have been said.
So things fester and build up,
Right.
and this is also, to me, what a lot of that movie was about.
Which also has a lot to do with Uncle Vanya as well.
Right.
Right, right.
Wait.
Okay.
Ed, can I ask how many other people saw Uncle Vanya? Because I have no idea who that is.
Okay. Oh, that's a good question, Cindy. Okay, show of hands, who's really familiar with it or having seen Uncle Vanya?
Or read it.
Or read it? Okay.
Who have not?
Who has not seen it?
Okay, who has not seen it or read it?
Right here.
Okay, so actually more than half.
But I
Okay,
looked it up.
okay. All right. For better and worse, I think I've seen it 3 times staged. I don't recall ever reading it, but I think I saw it. I know I saw it at least twice and possibly a third time, like way back. Not my favorite work, although one of the productions I saw, I really did kind of enjoy, but that was the only time. And I was like, why is this such a classic? It's, it's maudlin. It drags on. And so I have very mixed feelings about it, but one of the productions I saw kind of brought a new light to it. I don't remember what was specifically different, but it touched me where the other productions hadn't. So I think if it's done well, it can be powerful and moving. And there's something else I want to address here. There's other things, lots of things, but this work was very derivative of Uncle Vanya. And I wanted to look up what critics said about when you're making a piece of art that's so referential to this other work that's considered a classic, how does that affect the perception of your work? So there was actually a nice piece on that in Collider. Now, of course, I'm going to have to find it, but there was, this may be it actually. I think this is it, hopefully, I got it. Yes, I got it, okay. A man named Douglas Lehman, or Lehman, L-A-M-A-N, wrote in Collider in December of 2021. He called it one of the year's best movies. He said it gets much of its power from how it references the iconic play. And he starts out by saying how film critic Roger Ebert, who, one of the all-time greatest, he actually won a Pulitzer, once remarked that it's a bad idea to reference a beloved movie in your film, since it can only serve to remind people of superior features they could be watching instead. The same can be said for tremendous works from other mediums of artistic expression. A tedious film flashing a vivid painting on screen, for example, could inspire one to vacate the auditorium and check out a museum instead. This movie, though, is the perfect example of how to interweave classic works of art into your film, in this case, vintage plays, and not only distract from your story, but enhance it. And there's not only Uncle Vanya referenced here. Do anyone remember what the other work that was actually shown in the beginning was? Another classic, Waiting for Godot,
Oh,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Okay. And I've seen that several times, and I actually really do like that one.
Relate that to this movie. Waiting for Godot, I can relate. to this
Yes,
movie.
well, for a lot of
Like,
reasons.
really slow.
Yes,
Nothing
yes.
happens.
And they keep waiting for something that doesn't come, which is the resolution of their grief or happiness potentially, right? Which, you know, I don't know, is Godot supposed to be the Messiah, or is he supposed to be happiness, or some direction for Vladimir and Estragon? Okay, so it says here, Godot is all about two men waiting for something that'll never come. Their lives have been put on pause for a figure named Godot, a reflection of how much our existences are molded by others, even when they're not physically present. Similarly, Kafuku and Watari, so that's the film director in the play director in the movie, and the driver, are both individuals who've become trapped by the horrors of the past, and especially the complex emotions they feel towards those they've lost. The people who shape their lives are no longer on this earth, yet their individual presences are profoundly felt. Much like Waiting for Godot, protagonists Vladimir and Estragon, their lives are trapped in a state of stasis. To boot, using Godot as a mirror towards the plight of Kafuko and Watari establishes the way Drive My Car will be using classic art. Hamaguchi, the director, will not be dredging up works of the past for cheap fan service, but rather as a ways of conveying emotions that the Drive My Car characters struggle to communicate themselves. That I thought was an important point, because as you saw until like there's two scenes really where Kafuku finally sort of opens up. One is in the car with the other actor, and the other is with the driver towards the end of the movie. But until then, and he basically says he bottled everything up, and he really couldn't express himself. So, and he talks about how Uncle Vanya drags everything out of you because he's bottled up and he doesn't let that out. But in Uncle Vanya, it takes it out of him. And there was a whole issue with him having the reluctance to play the part. And then he gets forced, of course, to do it, which you knew was going to happen. So then this is made apparent once auditions for Uncle Vanya get underway and the actors have prepared dialogue from the play that vividly captures feelings Kafuku can't get out of his own mouth. Okay, and then there's a performer talking about how, quote, my existence is devoid of happiness, an appropriately overt encapsulation of how many emotions rooted in the past cloud Kafuku's present day dispositions. Okay, so there's a lot here. I'm not going to go through too much more. There's one, let me see if there's one other thing I wanted to say here. Okay, this kind of still references this point. Like with most of the people around him, Kafuku keeps that true self and all the complex emotions bottled up within at a distance. Drive My Car is cognizant that great art of the past doesn't just exist to be regurgitated for cheap nostalgia pops. Instead, it can also lead to us exploring new truths about ourselves and even getting to know others better. The latter quality is exemplified by how Kafuku initially treats both his cast and this version of Uncle Vanya strictly, even going as far as to tell one inquisitive actor that she does not need to know his intent for his play. She just needs to mechanically read the lines on the page. If you remember that scene, they're all sitting there doing the table read. They want to, start acting it out. He's like, no, we're staying here. You're reading. That's how good art functions, though, and Kafuku's newest approach to Uncle Vanya soars only when he and the actors become unafraid to become emotionally vulnerable with one another. In this sense, the use of Uncle Vanya is a springboard toward a depiction of how unity can provide some semblance of comfort in the wake of tragedy. The increasingly close relationship Kafuku and the actors have with Uncle Vanya also mirrors how Kafuku and Watari begin to chip away at the shells they've put around themselves, revealing the trauma and deeply conflicted feelings within. Chekhov's works were famously ambiguous productions that tackled heavy subjects, but staunchly refused to offer either tidy resolutions or morals to the audience members of his plays. Life does not offer these revelations that cure universal ails, so Chekhov's works would not deliver those as well. Okay, so that I did want to kind of cover that.
But at the end of Vanya,
Mhm.
Chekhov has these lines about, everything's going to be good. We're going to be at peace. We'll find the right place for ourselves. I can't remember, but it's a very sort of soothing, be hopeful kind
Okay.
of a
You
resolution.
can interpret it that way, or you can look at it that character is totally unrealistic and kind of delusional, but hopelessly optimistic.
Hopefully optimistic.
Okay, so there's a couple ways to look at it. Now, you can also remember the scene in the movie where he's comforting her, the driver, when they're looking at the demolished house of her,
That
it used
was
to be a
very
house.
touching.
And he's saying, it'll be okay, which is another of the many parallels with Uncle Vanya.
But it was a father-daughter scene.
It was almost like a father-daughter scene, right, right. Okay, and then, okay, as Chekhov realized long ago, you can't get rid of heavy instances of emotional turmoil. There's only living with such arduous parts of our psyche. But works of art like the plays of Chekhov or Drive My Car do allow viewers to explore such turmoil in a detailed and rich fashion. In leaning on a work of the past like Uncle Vanya, Drive My Car excels on countless levels, including in finding a way to capture the interior voices of characters who refuse to overtly communicate. By referencing a classic of the past so heavily, Drive My Car manages to craft characters, themes, and explorations of grief so powerful it becomes a classic of the present. No doubt future works of art will be leaning on Drive My Car, much like this movie leans on Uncle Vanya. And again, that was from Collider. And oh, and by the way, the guy who wrote that identifies himself as being on the Asperger's spectrum. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. That he put that in at the end on his bio. Douglas Lemon and Collider in December.
What is Collider?
Collider is a website that has different takes on the arts in a lot of cases. Other things, sometimes politics, but a lot on the arts.
Ed,
Yes.
so and also I like what you said about emotional vulnerability, which I think that there's a theme there which is major.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally about that. Right. Okay, so just to get back, because there's a couple of things I missed. Anyone on Zoom, I want to add anything at this point? Not yet? Okay. All right. So as you know, I think this had a 97 from 97 on Rotten Tomatoes out of 201 critics, 97% gave it a thumbs up. The audience score, 77. So overall good, but not as good, 20% less. And the critics' consensus was its imposing runtime holds a rich, patiently engrossing drama that reckons with self-acceptance and regret. And the audience consensus was, it might be a challenge if you're not ready for a movie on the longer, slower side, but it rewards patience with a deeply moving story. The film received a positive review from Manohla Dargis in the New York Times, where she wrote, "Drive My Car sneaks up on you, lulling you in with visuals that are as straightforward as the narrative is complex." She, I had another line that she gave it. 1 second. I wanted to find it because it was a pretty good one. So it did. I just got to find it. Oh boy, it's farther away than I thought. All right, I'll get to it later. She called it a masterpiece, but she had another adjective in front of it. All right, in The Guardian, Peter Bradshaw gave the film 5 stars out of 5, calling it, quote, an engrossing and exalting experience, unquote. And exalting, yeah, I didn't get that one. I didn't get that one. That's
See, that's uplifting. I don't see
yeah, yeah. And I want to talk about the ending with you folks as well, because but I actually have some quotes from the director when he was asked about the ending, and I'll get to that. But let's talk about the director a little bit. Ryusuke Hamaguchi, I hope I'm not totally butchering his name. He co-wrote the script with Takamasa Oi. It's just literally O-E. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's primarily based on the short story of the same name by Haruki Murakami from his 2014 short story collection called Men Without Women. The script also features elements from his story Scheherazade and Kino. Both are also part of Men Without Women. He's a very famous author in Japan. He's like, maybe like James Patterson is here, close to that level in Japan. Also, the guy who was the lead actor, 1 second, I don't want to mess his name up too badly. Hidetoshi Nishihama, yeah. He got great reviews. He won some awards and was nominated for others. But he's a very famous actor in Japan. From TV, he's gone back and forth between TV shows that were very popular and movies that were very popular. So getting him was a big coup. He was the director, the lead actor,
Oh, he was.
Oh, he was the director?
who played the director
Played
in
direct-
of the play
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Uncle Vanya.
Yeah,
The
okay.
actor who lost his
yeah,
wife.
right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's so he's a very big actor in Japan. And that was a big deal getting him because it basically meant in Japan, this movie's gonna get seen. And it did well in the box office. It won several awards. They had a lot of trouble making it because they started it before COVID and had to shut down for 6 months. And it was originally going to be shot in Busan instead of Hiroshima, but they changed it because of the pandemic. It was just too difficult going back and forth with the visas and all with COVID. So that shut it down. Also, anyone have any thoughts on the title?
Oh my God. The car is a character.
The car
It
is
is
the
one of
star
the
of the
main
show.
characters of the story.
Yeah, I thought the car could have been nominated for best
Right.
supporting.
The car was unbelievable. It was red. You could see it in the white. Everything was white when that red car was traveling.
And that's
So it
why the
was
car was
twice.
red, by the way,
Of
because
course,
in the book, the car was yellow. And the
Oh.
director changed it because he liked the chromatic contrast better with most of the background, especially with the snow.
I thought the original thing when I started watching it was that it was gonna be drive my car because that he eventually did lose his eyesight.
Right.
But that,
Oh, yes.
and that went nowhere. That had nothing.
Yeah,
that
it was
was-
red herring.
one random
I was
dog
thinking-
who's a-
A little bit.
He was fine.
I was thinking,
Right.
it really alluded to understand your own sorrow. I had to understand your life. I had to drive your car to see your sorrow to kind of reflect on mine.
Kind of like walking in someone else's
Right,
footsteps.
so, you know,
Okay,
Ed,
I like that. Yes,
was there any relevance to the fact that they were driving on one side of the street, but steering on the other? That was like a weird thing, like,
Right.
It was left-hand steer, but they drove on the right
Yeah,
side.
right.
well, the car isn't Japanese,
That's much.
it's a
Right.
sob.
It's a Saab. Swedish,
so
so.
Japan goes on the left side. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And the sign on it is very large, so you know it's a Saab 900.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, they paid a
Well,
lot of
Product
money.
placement, there it is.
And had
They don't
when we
make
first met,
Saabs
she had a
anymore.
Saab 900.
I did too. That was my first concern.
Oh, that's funny.
What's
But,
the significance that it's a 15-year-old car and it's in pristine condition? Like, what-
okay.
That too. You're right.
My take on the deal with the car was, what did he do in the car? Do you remember what his big activity in the car was?
He used to rehearse it. This
Practicing
is
his lines.
his lines.
Right, but how did he,
Listen to his wife.
he listened to her voice on what?
Cassette.
On a
On a
cassette.
cassette. No new cars have cassettes.
Right.
You really, it's much harder to do that.
I have a 22 and it has a cassette still.
No way.
Yes.
Really?
I'm so happy in it.
Wow.
I'm so
Okay.
happy.
Because I haven't seen any other new car. I mean, most of them don't even have CDs anymore.
My hypothesis is he had that car because it has a cassette.
Because he was able to get that for that, exactly. I think that was a big part of it. And that's why he took care of it, because it also let him kind of take care of his wife's voice to keep hearing it. So I thought that was
Because
kind
he
of.
kept saying how old the car is and everything else. He's had it for so long.
It was so shiny and red.
Right, he kept it in good shape. Yep.
And I have another question, I'm sorry. Not sure if it has any relevance whatsoever, but I felt like I was halfway through the movie and that's when the credits showed.
Yes.
That's-
Yes.
That was started again.
So does anyone have any thoughts on why that was? When the credits came in after a half hour or so?
Like
Right,
people
and
were turning
it
it off.
So basically, my interpretation, and from what I read, at least one other critic referenced it. What you saw up to that point was the prologue,
Prologue, yeah.
and that's kind of where the movie starts, and that's why the director put them in there to kind of clue you in, that you saw background information.
Yeah, it was perfect. I thought.
It's like a double feature.
But that is kind of rare. Yes,
Also, no,
Rick.
I was just gonna say, like, the car was pristine and perfect, but his life wasn't.
his life was a mess.
His life was a mess.
Right.
So it's like departmentalizing a part of
Right.
him that he could control, which was that car.
Right. Although when the movie started, you didn't think his life was a mess, right?
No, he had a wife.
I gotta say,
Well, wait, I mean, what did you say, when the movie started, you didn't?
You didn't
know?
think his life was a mess?
But you don't know.
Right, but they looked like they got along well. They were both successful doing what they liked.
Right.
Right.
There was no like emotion. He would say goodbye, they would say bye.
Yeah.
That was a clue.
There was no. Like,
Yes,
kiss
Bart,
goodbye.
Bart.
I think I missed a whole lot. I admit that I think I missed a lot of the point. But some of it was, this, to me, he had an incredible creative idea. And the car was part of it. The car was, he listened to that tape and his whole concept was, it didn't matter what language you spoke, because you had to memorize everything. You knew that you didn't have to use this signal anymore when my dialogue ended, because you memorized the whole play, and he did that. He was the whole play. So to me, that was the whole thing. He had he was an artist that just, he had an amazing life. So he and his wife, and yes, there was bad stuff there, clearly, but I think I missed all of it. He was such a creative genius. To me, I just reveled in his ability.
That's what a director does of a play. A good director learns the entire script.
It's like the conductor of an orchestra.
But he made the cast do the same. They kept on reading
Yes,
and reading.
he
No
beat the
emotion,
hell out of him with it.
just
He had
memorized
no emotion
everything.
when he walked in on his wife.
They all
It was not the sex
language.
multiple kids.
They didn't speak the same language. They all spoke something different.
I know.
He didn't want to deal with
It's brilliant.
So what do you think that signifies, that here he's doing this production of Uncle Vanya in many different languages, including sign language? Thoughts on that?
He just assumed that it was.
Wow.
Maybe that it was a universal experience of this. I mean, as Fred said, it's universal in people. We all know people who are like this. We do.
I don't know.
I think it's one of the hopeful signs of the movie about overcoming differences.
Yeah, people who
To
get.
being able to
stuck.
relate and communicate, even though, you're trying to do it in different languages. Although it said, their production notes, from what I read, it made, doing the scene, actually for the film, very complicated, because they had to be translated from Japanese, in many cases to Korean, and then to Korean Sign Language and back.
Sign language.
Everything.
She was beautiful.
Yeah.
And she was so great.
All right, but we didn't really cover the topic of the title.
Oh,
Anyone more thoughts on the title?
He gave up control.
yeah.
I think what this
It's a good
gentleman
one, Barb.
said.
That's good.
Yep.
And letting
That's
her
part of
drive.
Control. And he gave up control in the end.
Yeah.
And so actually he won.
Contrast.
By
Contrast,
giving up the
right.
car to Misaki.
Matoria.
Misaki.
Misaki, you were right, Misaki.
Misaki, he actually won. He did get free.
Right, he moved past it at the end, right. By giving her the car, he kind of was able to finally close that chapter of his life. We'll talk about the ending a little more, but the title, anyone, the Beatles song. You think it's a coincidence? It's not. He made a movie before this called Norwegian Wood. So there's a definite connection. And I looked into this. He tried getting the rights to the song Drive My Car to use that in the film. He didn't have the budget for it. So he couldn't. And he used Beethoven with a small orchestra instead for those parts.
Could you sing this song?
No.
What is that song? I'm not.
The Beatles Drive My Car? Maybe you can drive my car. Yes,
Oh,
I'm
that
gonna-
song.
Maybe I'll love it, right?
As a matter of fact, when we were seeking out the movie and talking into the Fire Stick, what comes up, the Beatles.
Yeah, we said drive my car, and all we got was music. We couldn't find a movie.
Right, okay.
Just one thing, promise me before we leave, we're gonna talk about the scene when he
What
first
about
walks in
how
without
the
having
story?
sex with the actor.
That story.
Yeah,
That's the first time.
That's
Yes.
beautiful.
It's like,
Or it's
No,
been many.
no.
promise me we're gonna talk about
We'll talk about where he comes in on
When he
them.
walks in having sex
yes,
with the actor.
yes.
That's a
We
shock,
will.
we knows that happened.
But
Okay.
do you have a problem with that?
No, we want to know if he knew what was going on or he didn't know.
Well, yeah, he did know.
Yeah.
Here's the audience.
At first you thought he didn't.
Right, but
then it comes-
he did.
it
It
comes
comes out
out.
afterwards that she was doing his
Totally
thing.
good reaction.
With that guy?
And
No,
wasn't
it's
that
different
different
guy.
guy? Only started back.
All right, well, let's cover that a little bit now, because
Okay.
when he walked in on her,
He wasn't.
do we know who the guy was?
Not yet, not
Yeah,
yet,
yeah,
not yet.
right away.
It's too
I'm
early.
not sure we do.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, no, we
Do
didn't.
you think it was the young actor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't know.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
She certainly told one of that
Well,
guy.
Elizabeth said that's why he got the part, because she thought it was him. He wanted to miscast, well, not miscast him, but
The young
cast him in a
actor-
truck.
Is there a question about that? Ed, is there a question about that?
Yes, that, were you positive? Because we only saw him from the back. Do you think that was really that young actor
Yes.
that she was having the affair with?
Yes.
I think.
She was having an affair with that young actor at some point.
She did, yes. But we don't know if it was that scene when he walked in or not.
Ed, I thought it was more when she brought him to the stage, backstage.
Yes.
Right?
Then there was something going on there.
Yes,
with
it looked
her.
pretty
Not
clear,
when-
right?
You know, I didn't know.
But, you know, chicken and egg, which one
But when
was first,
she
right?
brought him on, you know, to introduce him to her husband, that was.
All right, okay, let me just, interestingly enough, when you look up Drive My Car, the song,
Yeah.
it says, laden with sexual innuendo, this song is about a guy who meets an aspiring actress who tells him he can, quote, drive my car, unquote, as she has a keen interest in him and might even be in love. She keeps lying to lure him in. I can show you a better time, is the line it references. But when he finally agrees to take the job, she admits she doesn't have a car, but still wants him to be her driver. It's pretty clear all this driving talk is leading to sex, but there's no proof that it isn't just a song about a guy, a girl, and a car, making it another radio-friendly Beatles track. Yes, Bart.
Can we go back to the young actor?
Yes.
To me, it was a lot about revenge. That was the message and
Casting him in that part.
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
it was like, I'm gonna get you, you
He
know?
wanted to find out more.
He just was revenge. Come on,
Revenge,
man.
how would that be revenge? By
He also
casting
knew
him?
Casting him in a role that is so bad.
Well,
for.
he's half the age of the part,
Yeah,
for one thing.
And he's a famous actor,
Famous TV
obviously,
actor.
who then committed a crime, which is a whole other issue that I don't care.
But he was,
It was with underage girl.
Yeah, but that was thrown away as a non-issue.
We didn't know about that. till later.
But I thought that's why I thought it was like a revenge story. You know, he was just trying to get at the guy. That's why I missed a
he
lot
knew
of.
that the guy didn't have much control. So that was part of it.
Yes, he wanted to help channel him. I mean, did he want to rehabilitate the guy or did he just want revenge?
No.
I think that's up for discussion. I don't think it's as clear cut as
I
you
didn't
do.
think it was
I think
revenge.
maybe he started out wanting revenge on him and that's why he put him in a part that would make him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think after he got to know him a little, I'm not as convinced.
Yeah, he learned.
Isn't it about
Yeah,
He
him,
actually kind of,
isn't it about him wanting to come to terms with his own guilt that he didn't come and save his wife? He didn't come back when he walked away when she was having sex and then she dies.
Well-
Soon after with a cerebral hemorrhage.
You're right.
About that.
More to it than that. The night that she died, you remember what she said before he left?
I'll talk to you.
She wanted to have apparently a serious conversation and he later said he delayed coming home until late.
And that's why.
He was scared.
That's why he felt
He was
guilty.
frightened she was gonna leave him, right? He was frightened.
Right, right. So, and that's why he felt guilty, right?
Also, Ed,
Yes,
just another thing, but the driver was the same age his daughter would have been.
yes.
You know,
Yeah, that's true. The same
he
age, like
said, "Oh,
25 or
my
whatever,
daughter-
right?
I'm 20, my daughter would have been 23 and the whole
Right.
shebang. I think that's also
Because even at the end, if I may, but even at the end when she was shopping, the
Yeah.
driver,
yeah.
all of a sudden her hair came down
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she
that's-
just seemed a
And her
little more
scar
vulnerable.
Like a baseball
Yeah.
cap on.
She
That
got
was
a
scar
dog,
on her
she
face.
did a bang.
It was like she
But
walked into the daughter.
The actor
Yeah.
filled in the story. He did not know the end of the story of the girl sneaking into the house and the burglar. He didn't ever heard the end of the story.
The young actor knew
The
it.
young actor knew the entire story.
And you know, wait a minute, from previously, when she was creative and doing her writing, so obviously he had slept with her. I mean, that was pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the young actor admitted he was in love with her too.
Did he tell the end of the story?
He did, because he obviously heard it from her.
The
The
burglar.
story.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
The one that when she told the story.
What a story that was.
And then the character in the story that turns into a lamprey, right?
Oh, yeah.
Lamprey eel, which is a parasite.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know what
I
that
guess
was?
they had longer sex.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Cindy says, I guess they had longer sex because he knew a lot more of the story.
Right, right.
You're right. That's when she.
All right, let's see, there's something else I wanted to cover with you guys here. But, all right, David, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss in that scene about that?
No, I wanted to know if people thought that's the first time he realized that she was having sex with other guys, or?
No.
We thought it
Okay,
was
no,
when
no,
it
but
happened.
at that point in the movie, you think it was, that's what you.
Right.
You're
Right.
always like, why is he doing something?
Why is he
Right,
doing that?
why
Right, and
is
for
he
like,
doing that?
for almost an hour, maybe an hour or so, you don't have an answer as to why he wasn't doing anything until you see that scene later where he reveals his fears that, you know, he didn't want to have the unbalance in their relationship, and he was afraid he would lose her.
Maybe relevant to that is, I didn't quite understand how they decided not to have more kids. Was it he that
She didn't
initiated that
want
or
to.
she?
She said she didn't want
She went
to.
along with it.
Yeah, she said.
Afterwards, after they lost the one, she didn't, it broke her heart too much, she didn't want to. Yep,
After you lose a child, it's very easy to want a divorce.
right, that happens, apparently that happens a lot, yep.
It happens.
I'd like
Okay.
to ask the part about the young actor with the guy clicking the shutter. And it happened
Oh.
2 different times
Yes.
when he clicked the shutter and then he went after him, and then the second time he obviously beat him to a pulp.
Right,
Right. What did that have to do with anything?
okay, it was a, all right, it's interesting you say that, because that goes to one of my notes, because I thought there were a few flaws in the movie. And that to me was the way of getting him out of there, so he had to play the part, which forced him to confront his fears. But the real flaw is, anyone who's ever been involved with a production like this knows, you have understudies. They didn't have any understudies, right? No understudies. No one was an understudy. So,
And nobody
okay.
cares about the paparazzi anyway.
Well, in Japan, I think it's even a bigger deal than here. Japan and Korea too, I know. So that was a big deal. And obviously he had, you know, temper issues. He hated his privacy being invaded, but he's a celebrity. So, you know, you've got a dichotomy there, but that's the deal. And he didn't like it at all. So he overreacted and you saw what happened. He
Ed,
faced the music. Yes.
before we leave, it doesn't have to be now, and we think, the dog thing, there was a dog thing going on. Silence. There was a dog, that dog that showed up at the end.
Well, then, all right. So hang on, I want to find this because Elizabeth couldn't be here, but she sent me some questions. That was one of them.
The dog
I
showed
gotta
up in the
find
car.
it,
I think it was.
I want to get to the interview with the director because that'll answer some of your questions, I'm sure as well. But I got to find oh, Nancy, it was Nancy's, I think. Here it is, Nancy's questions, right? Okay, so Nancy asked, she goes, the license plate at the end was different. Did he give her the car? Well, yes, he gave her the car. What about the dog? Okay, so to me, this is just my take. I didn't read anything about this. The fact that she had a dog showed that she is open now and willing to experience emotions and love.
More stable, maybe?
Maybe more stable, but also
Yes.
being willing to care for another being shows that she's moved past too, not just him for being able to give up that car, but for her to be able to to take care of an animal.
Wasn't it the woman's dog?
Yeah, wasn't it the same dog?
I thought it was the same
Right.
dog.
It was the deaf woman's dog.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it is.
Oh, it was?
It was
So
the same dog.
that I missed. I just thought she
Yeah.
was taking care of
Yeah,
it.
it was the
Deaf
deaf woman's
couple's
dog.
Yeah, it was the same dog.
The deaf
Yeah,
woman's
that
dog.
woman and her husband had a
And they went to
dog.
dinner.
Right.
They had the dinner at their house.
Right.
Kind of,
She had the dog.
and she was playing with the dog. and-
It was their
I
dog.
thought it was that.
I
kid,
didn't
too.
realize that.
So they all were living together as a family.
That's what I was thinking.
No.
Maybe they were going to their house for dinner and she was buying the groceries and she took the dog with her.
Oh, that's good.
Interesting.
That's, and
All
I was
right,
thinking,
that's
could
totally
they
different.
end
Okay,
up together or were the four of them just friendly and she took the dog to the supermarket?
great question. I,
think so.
And she's in
I saw
Korea.
it
I don't know.
struck me.
In town, she had passed her feelings about killing her mother, and she was finally able to get on the flight.
Yeah, but I
And
thought she was,
therefore, she was going on.
I thought it was the same dog.
Yeah, but-
It was the same dog.
Yes, the same
Same dog.
Wow.
That's I love Barbara's explanation.
It's the same
She was
car,
out, she went
just
shopping
all
for
there.
stuff for dinner.
Took
And
the dog
we
with
saw-
her
we
and
saw
then they
that
were
she
going
had
back
some-
and the four of them were gonna be together and they had dinner.
And we saw that when she was with the Korean family the first time, that she had some affection for the dog. She got
Yes.
down from the
Right,
table,
yes,
she got
she did.
down on the floor,
Right.
so she and the
She
dog
kind
had a
of ignored the
bond.
people and went to the dog.
all right. Did you have anything else about the dog you wanted to say, Cindy?
No,
Did we
thank you.
cover? Okay. No, that's a good
As a
question.
dog
But,
person.
and Bart, I didn't realize it was the same dog. That's my bad. And I saw it twice. So, okay.
You saw it twice?
Oh.
Once by myself and then once with Ann. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm out of your life.
I have another question that I hope somebody can address here. So my experience with the language Japanese and the people I know who speak Japanese, it's not an emotional language. It is a
Right.
very flat kind of thing.
Right.
Right.
So my experience, and I wanted to ask a good friend of ours about this. So all of the talk that we've heard about the lack of emotion, I think either I missed that or I just assumed it was, the language is not
Yes.
like this, that we speak.
But their faces were totally
But that's,
non-emotional.
That's Japanese.
That's the culture.
Japanese culture.
Interestingly enough, which character showed not one of the major characters showed more emotion? It was the Korean guy,
Yeah.
right?
And the
And the
driver
sign
showed
language.
nothing. She was like the most blank slate
Yeah.
ever. She did not show.
The driver.
She was like always.
Well, she did,
Not
but
read her at all. And
you know when I saw that she was actually moved when he praised her driving
yes.
to the other guy.
Yes.
Right.
She
And
she almost
said,
cried.
Thank you.
Her eyes went like, whoa, it kind of blew her away.
It's
Yeah.
all she knew how to do also.
Well,
That's what she was brought up for.
And
But
also
you know
the
who was
baby
really
that
wonderful?
he noticed
The
the driving,
husband of
Yes.
the woman.
because the mother
Who did.
never, she knows.
Yeah, the Korean guy.
Korean
Yeah, one second, Rebecca.
No, I was just gonna say that the mother, she had to learn how to drive, so there wasn't a bump in the road.
Right.
The
Oh, that
mother
was so
was,
cool.
who was a whatever, and when
That's
he
so cool. praised
praised her, this was like, like he noticed, it was such a wonderful thing to her, like. Right.
And then did you notice how he showed a big sign of respect for her later in the film? What he did that was different?
He invited
sat
her out to dinner
Sat in
with
front.
He sat next to her.
Oh, he sat next to her, right.
Oh, right,
That's right, that's right.
Yes, Fred.
Elizabeth said that the driver killed her mother, but I think there was a landslide and
Yes.
her conflict was she didn't save her mother.
Right.
And she was an abused daughter with a mother who was very mentally ill.
Right.
So there was real conflict, a
The
love
question
hate,
is whether
you
she
know.
could have really.
And there's a
saved her.
parallel there because
Exactly.
was this guy, the lead actor, was going to get divorced probably from his wife, and he had a love-hate relationship. She was having sex with everybody in the block, and he was embarrassed by it, I'm sure, and
No,
just
I think he
kept it
did.
inside. So I think there was a parallel between the two people. They
They had the
lost,
same kind of wound.
they lost relatives, but they had mixed feelings.
And they had the same kind of guilt.
Right.
He needed his wife, and they both thought they killed.
Right.
She said, I
They
killed
felt-
my
they
wife.
felt
She
that
said,
they
I
killed
killed
her.
my wife.
All right, I want to give you some quotes from the director. And he does talk about the ending, by the way, but I'll get your feelings right before that. This is a quote. To some extent, all films are fiction and documentary at the same time. He had made several documentaries that were pretty highly regarded. I have experience to make both, and I believe there is no such thing as pure fiction or pure documentary. The actor is acting in front of the camera. What the camera captures there is a documentary about the actors because they're doing something which happens only once. All right. Now, regarding the ending, anyone have thoughts, pros and cons? Do you think you could have ended the movie before that scene with her shopping in the store?
Yeah, about like an hour.
And a lot less
During the credits,
private.
during the credits.
The first.
Just kidding.
No, it's move on, that's move on time.
All right, well, he was asked about the ending.
Can you please, I'm sorry, I have forgotten the ending. We started
Yeah,
a week or so
refresh
ago.
our memory.
Could you like quickly,
What was the?
What happened?
She
Shopping
was
for
driving the
supplies,
car.
she has the dog in the car, she has the red
One
car,
person, one person.
and she's moving on, she's taking the red car and
Okay.
leaving.
That's right.
yeah,
Okay.
And she has the dog with her.
there's a
And
dog.
there's
And the car now belongs to her.
Right,
Right.
There's one other.
Yes,
thing.
Amy.
She talks earlier as they're driving about the scar on her face. And
Okay.
She was saying that there was no reason to fix it, but a doctor said he could take care of it for her. And at the very end, the camera focuses on her cheek.
It's that side
Scar is
profile and it's gone.
That's
That's right. Good point. Yep, good point.
So at that point, she had something to live for. Her life was worth something. Because prior to that, it didn't mean anything to her to have that fixed, because she felt nothing about herself. She had no
Right,
self-esteem.
right. She had no self-esteem.
Does
And
anybody
this showed she
remember
did.
if there was music on when she drove off at the end?
it wasn't Uncle Vanya for sure.
Yeah, I don't.
No, there was always tape on.
Yeah, I think there was, I don't know, I think I remember violins. I think I remember violins at the end.
How
But
do we
okay,
know
so-
that, and how do we know that she owns the car now?
The license plate's different.
Well, maybe they moved to Korea.
Right, maybe they live together now. Father and daughter.
Right.
I don't
I
know.
thought she was driving.
He literally wasn't in the picture.
Oh, but how do we know that? How do we know that he gave her the car?
We don't, we just.
Conjecture.
We don't know.
It's just, it's implied.
Everybody.
No, I thought they're together. I thought she's shopping for the two of them.
I think she's shopping for the
She's
four of
not
them.
driving him anymore.
Barbara thinks she's shopping for the four of them.
That's what
I just thought she was doing the groceries. I didn't even,
No,
so, okay, so it's open. It's one of those things that's open. But what the director said was, he said, once I talked with a big fan of Drive My Car, who said it really would have been perfect without that ending, and he laughs. Well, I think maybe the reason I ended that way is to make it a bit imperfect.
Right.
In terms of the final staging of the play in applause, if I had ended the movie at that point, presumably the audience would want to do a round of applause. And it would almost be like closing of a full circle. But for me, that didn't really feel like a satisfying ending. I wanted to do something a bit more disruptive to leave some sort of break. On the ending, I have no plans of any kind of making a sequel, but I was just sort of playing around with things at the end there. One other thing I'd like to say is that the title itself also might give a clue to how you can interpret the ending.
So she's driving her car.
So is she driving her car? Is she driving his car?
She's driving the car. It's not just the car. She's not just driving the car. She's driving.
It's her car now. That's the way with a different license plate.
Different people are together.
1 second, Mary.
Is that the ending of the side story, or is that the ending that?
I can't tell you what the differences are. I know the story was very short and apparently blunt, and that they really expounded on it. And actually, I wanted to get back to that because excuse me, guys, how they got to the to being able to make the movie with the author's blessing. So, and let's see if I can quote where this came from, because I want to make sure I know that. Okay. So this was in screendaily.com. Matt Schlee wrote in March of this year, when it came to getting permission to adapt the story, Yamamoto, I should go back a little because this is kind of cool actually. So the idea of making the movie wasn't originally the directors, it was the producers. It started with a hunch. About a decade ago, it struck Japanese producer Teruhisa Yamamoto that a young filmmaker named Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who is the director, might be ideally suited to adapt a story by Haruki Murakami, perhaps Japan's best-known living author. There's a certain and here's Yamamoto, the producer, being quoted. There's a certain similarity between the two in the way they touch on themes like love and sex, says Yamamoto, who produced Hamaguchi's 2018 film, Ahsoka 1 and 2, which was screened in Cannes. The producer also thought the subject matter would stretch Hamaguchi creatively. Quote, he hadn't really touched on the subject of death in his narrative films. Murakami had themes that fit Hamaguchi perfectly and themes that might draw something new out of him. That was my hunch. He originally suggested another Murakami story, but after much discussion, Hamaguchi suggested Drive My Car, a tale about a theater director grieving the death of his wife who chauffeured around Tokyo in a Saab by a mysterious young woman. I read it and thought it was extremely well suited to a film adaptation, says Yamamoto. Of course, it won several major awards. All right, and then I want to mention that too in a minute, but the road to success was not without a few bumps, including the giant roadblock of COVID. All right, getting the author's blessing. Or when it came to getting permission, Yamamoto knew that while Murakami does not usually allow his novels to be filmed, quote, from some time ago, he's allowed independent filmmakers to adapt his short stories, provided they properly explain their intentions. He wrote a letter, Hamaguchi, the director, wrote a letter to Murakami doing just that and received a yes with no further comment. Even now, he says the two creators have not spoken directly about the film, though Murakami has praised it in the press. My impression, and here's the director, my impression is that Murakami thinks of his short stories as seeds. Sometimes they flower into full-length novels by the author himself. Sometimes they flower into films. It's as if he lent us one of those seeds and gave us the freedom to raise it however we liked. With his permission in hand, then they just had to get the funding, which was another challenge. And then getting the actor. Not only is he one of Japan's most famous stars, he's also a huge cinephile who wanted to work with Hamaguchi. It was a great match creatively, this is the producer talking, and it helped give the sponsors peace of mind. And then they talked about how they wanted to originally shoot it in Busan, South Korea, but with COVID, that became impossible.
What's the place?
Busan.
Where's that?
In Korea, South Korea.
Oh.
And then, you know, I also think the other thing, choosing Hiroshima, it was where the bomb was dropped.
That's what I.
There's a lot of damaged feelings there. So here you got these damaged characters,
Right.
you know, who were in this damaged city. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. All right, there was one other thing I wanted to cover. Oh, I wanted to mention this, some trivia on the film. That was kind of cool. That's back here. One second, I know it's right in the end here. Okay, so this was interesting. It was the first Japanese film nominated for Best Picture. I had to read that twice because I'm thinking, oh, Akira Kurosawa. Well, but those were for Best Foreign Film. This was nominated for Best Picture as well as Best Foreign Film.
There's 10 now. There used to only be 6.
True. Okay. It became the latest and the first non-English language film of the only 6 to win the Best Picture from all 3 major US critics groups, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, New York Film Critics, and the National Society of Film Critics. So wait till you hear the other 5 that this film is in company with now. Schindler's List, Goodfellas, LA Confidential, The Social Network, and The Hurt Locker.
Wow. Wow.
That's it.
Oh, wow.
And at Cannes, where this film debuted, it won 3 awards, including Best Screenplay. Let's see.
How many Oscars did it win?
It
Won
had 4
several.
nominations, but it won Best Foreign Film and Best Adapted Screenplay. Okay, anyone else have a comment? Okay, all right. Okay, I think that about covers it. Okay, any other thoughts?
I had
Barbara?
something struck me as very significant. They were driving.
Yeah.
And does it?
But there were several scenes where they showed they were driving away from the place. And it seemed to me they're driving away towards something else. Because you saw like the cars driving this way and you saw the back scene, you know, like what they were driving from.
Right.
And that to me was a real significant thing. And they showed it, they did that several times in the movie.
Yeah, they showed a lot of tunnels
Point of
too.
view.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a point, of
Japan.
most of the time it's going forward, but a lot of times it was like where they had come from.
Which is of course important for the characters
Right.
because they keep
Because they were,
trapped by their pasts, right? Yes. Was there a hand back there?
You
Yes.
mentioned the tunnels. Fred wanted to know, what was the significance of all those tunnels, do you know?
You know, I think it just sets it up that, you know, at some point you're gonna get to the end of the tunnel. And you're gonna come through at the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know.
It's Japan. They have
a
tunnels
lot
and
of tunnels.
bridges.
I have,
Every street scene
I
has
But
tunnels and bridges.
cinematography
Yeah.
wise, you know,
this might be a really ridiculous question.
Never.
There is no such thing.
Okay. In, no, thank you. In the audience, they had this audience full of people and they had people speaking Korean, people speaking Japanese, people doing sign language in Korean. Did they have?
yeah, they had super titles. Big screen with several
Oh, I'm thinking
translations
like,
together. Yeah.
how do all these people know all these?
Everybody memorized the play.
That was a prerequisite for the audience.
Fred, yes. Fred?
Anne always tells me that,
Thank you.
Anne always tells me that transportation dreams are very important. A car or a train is a transportation dream. It means you're moving from one part of your life into another. And I think that's.
Sure, very fair point. That's, and you know, he had the 1 hour drive even when he was in Hiroshima to get from where he was staying to, because that way he would listen
Right.
to his wife's voice in the play. Yes.
But I think that was important that we were in the car with them. I know it was at nauseam, but I didn't really think that, to be honest with you, but I thought it was an important part of the film because he was listening, he was stuck listening to his wife's voice and we were stuck with him and we
Right.
experienced that. So I
Yes,
think
we
you
were.
had to be in the car. You were stuck. You didn't like it. We were all stuck.
And how important do you
He
think
was stuck.
to know Chekhov and Uncle Vanya to appreciate the movie? And could that explain some of the discrepancy between the critics who obviously know Uncle Vanya? I didn't, and you know, in the audience, I mean, do you think it, to make it a,
Okay, my thought was that the movie actually showed too much of Uncle Vanya,
Yeah.
of them producing it. But I think that was the point, was for the people who didn't know Uncle Vanya to make sure they did have enough to see the parallels. And, you know, some of the editing helped with that, you know, like after one scene plays it out on the actors, you see the actual characters with similar issues.
and do you make anything of the fact that he would say, this play is so cathartic, when you do it, it's gonna drag stuff out of you.
Right.
He obviously chose to direct that play,
Right.
you know, I mean.
Well, he had been playing it
Oh, yeah.
a lot,
Yeah.
and here he was trying to transition to just directing it. And of course, he gets sucked back in to play it one more time.
Sucked back in? Chose to be sucked back in.
Well, he had a day to think about it and he decided to do it, you know,
Nice.
There was no one else to do.
No, but he put that.
because they didn't have an understudy.
There you go.
Yes.
Just for the record, and I may be a minority here, and I know everyone's saying that that driver was perhaps, you know, the daughter. I actually think for me, maybe it's my head or something, I think they had a sexual thing going. Now, I don't think they had a sexual thing happening, but I felt a sexual thing between those two. And as a matter of fact, when she was shopping and her hair came down, how does he know what his daughter would have looked like 20-something years ago? She looked like his wife to me. That's all, Thea. Just
I
wanted
never-
to-
Okay, Cindy, as to your first point,
Thank you.
during the movie, Anne actually was wondering if there was a sexual chemistry between the two of them. I really didn't think so, but it was interesting that you thought that, and Anne thought there might be something else there too.
I thought there was gonna be something. eventually.
Right, you
right?
thought so, but he's like.
At that moment.
But he lost a daughter.
She was at the age of the daughter.
I didn't think I could have.
Father figure.
Right.
So there was a
But, you know,
bond, but
so
it
they
wasn't
could've been,
sexual, it's just.
It didn't seem to be, but I thought maybe eventually they would.
All right.
Adam.
Okay, thank you for tuning in on Zoom. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you, Ed.
May 24th, next time, Thursday, May 26th, sorry, May 26th. Hope we see you then.
And when are you gonna give us the movie?
I'll send that out soon.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, guys.
Cookies over here.
And will we ever have a romantic comedy?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what you guys vote on.